And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from, in this case, fire-ridden Los Angeles area. So if you are not living in Los Angeles, consider yourselves fortunate. The air quality here is atrocious. It's actually pretty hard to breathe. So what can I say? It's tough here. The sky is dark, despite it being 10 o'clock in the morning and in theory cloudless. So, but in any event, thank you for joining me today. And this is we're sort of kicking off the new year here. This is our 6th year of my main show, I guess you could call it, People Making Money. It's an outgrowth of the original Way to Wow show. And, honestly, it seems like it was only yesterday that we were turning my living room into a television studio and bringing in bartenders and all of that. And so, it shows you that time flies, but really appreciate your viewership over the years, and hopefully you've found it helpful for you in your lives. So today my topic is hire this coach for free. I think that's what it was in the social media. I'm going to talk about a fellow by the name of Dale Carnegie. And excuse me one second. I have his biography here. This is a book by Stephen Watts, Self-Help Messiah, Dale Carnegie and Success in Modern America. So in thinking about sort of the introductory remarks I wanted to make for this show, was reflecting historically. So America has almost from the beginning was thought to be the land of opportunity. People came here because they were seeking religious freedom. They came here because they wanted sort of social freedom, if you will. And in that sense, I mean, freedom from a much more rigid class system that was in Europe than has been the case here in the United States. To escape religious persecution or a rigid class system, that was the opportunity that the United States presented. So the idea that one came to the United States to become successful in the way we mean that today, which is usually meant financially successful. So I don't know that that was really part of the gestalt of colonial and post-revolution America. Success, as we define it today, I think is really more of a creature of the industrialization process that took place here in the United States, starting in the 19th century with the building of railroads, the invention of the telegraph, the building of clothing manufacturing and cloth manufacturing and clothing manufacturing facilities, the building of shoe manufacturing plants. So as America industrialized and the ability to generate wealth from something other than inherited property, i.e., from manufacturing or mercantilism, that really became the idea that really fostered the idea of anyone can be successful, right? So while probably the most noted silversmith in the United States ever was Paul Revere. All right, we still have cookware named after him, Revereware, copper bottom cookware. Someone like Paul Revere was not going to become wealthy the way someone like Andrew Carnegie became wealthy. Andrew Carnegie became wealthy through the steel manufacturing business primarily. And he built essentially, a steel empire. The Rockefellers built an empire based on oil and oil refining, I should say. So there were people who built wealth through the acquisition of huge tracts of land, and building huge ranches, and running a lot of cattle and selling the cattle, for their meat. So that was going on, but that was also a primarily a post-Civil War phenomenon, because those vast tracts of land were, for the most part, unavailable in the Atlantic seacoast colonies, and even in the sort of next group of colonies as you went west between the Atlantic seacoast and the Mississippi River. So it wasn't until places like Texas and the Middle West, Kansas, New Mexico, and so on. It wasn't until those territories became part of the United States that we had these absolutely huge ranches, and had the huge cattle drives and that sort of thing. So the Industrial Revolution created a change in the perspective of people in America, and started to help, I guess, bring about the reality that anyone in America could be successful. So as some people became successful, others wanted to gain that same success. And they may not have had quite the business acumen. They may not have had the drive that an Andrew Carnegie had, or a Rockefeller had. And they may not really have desired success on that kind of enormous scale. Nonetheless, they did seek financial success. And so it was, into that opening, I guess we could say, walked Dale Carnegie. So I'll tell you a little bit about his life. He was born in 1888. So you can see he was born in the late 19th century into a poor farming family in Missouri. Now, that was a very, very typical beginning for someone in the United States. And early on in his life, he struggled with self-esteem, and these struggles, along with his ambition, really shaped his interest in personal improvement, which is, if you think about someone like Teddy Roosevelt, for example, also a big believer in what at that time was called personal improvement. And so he ended up pursuing public speaking and sales jobs before really becoming, as Stephen Watts calls him, the self-help messiah, if you will. So, and by the way, much of what I'm talking about comes from Watts's book, and if you are interested in self-improvement, So I would encourage you to get Stephen Watts's book. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It, of course, will be an affiliate link, as is the case when I do these. But I think it's useful to know not only a person's philosophy, but something about the person himself, because if we don't think the person himself is a worthwhile individual, we probably don't want to adopt his philosophy. So when he was 48, Carnegie published his seminal book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. So it was 1936. And it really became the cornerstone of self help literature. I heard about that book from the time I was a teenager, if not, a boy. Um, and it really did launch this self help. I guess we could call it an industry, more of a movement in the United States. And so, in How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie combines practical advice with philosophical insights. He really emphasizes optimism and charisma and the power of positive relationships, right? So if you think about it, relationships between employers and employees in the 19th century were oftentimes power relationships. Certainly in the 18th century, that was the case. You might, you know, an employer might essentially buy an indentured servant, and that person had to pay off what was called the bond, which is the payment that the employer made. And oftentimes these employers were not particularly kind to their indentured servants. And by the way, and the reason I mentioned indentured servitude was that was a way that people came to the United States who were looking for opportunity greater than what they had where they were coming from. Now, obviously, the relationships between masters and slaves was not a positive relationship, but that's also not an employment relationship, at least in the context we mean it today. And so, but clearly not a positive relationship. And even if you look at, like I said, 19th century relationships, if you look at the military, for instance, the way officers treated enlisted men was nothing like how they're treated today, and it was a tougher world, frankly, right? And so the idea of having positive relationships was, not something that was, widely thought about when Carnegie started talking about it. And I would say even interpersonal relationships were not of the nature they are today. So I'm sure you've heard the popular adage, children are to be seen and not heard, right? So it's not to say that parents weren't loving, they certainly were. But if you were a child in an upper class family, or I guess would be better to call it a wealthy family, you were probably raised by a governess. You didn't have a whole lot of contact with your parents. If you did, oftentimes you were taught to be rather in awe of your parents. And so the kind of close child parental relationships that I think most parents strive for today didn't really exist, in the 19th and early 20th century. So if you've ever seen the movie Mary Poppins, which of course takes place in England, but Edwardian England and the attitudes there were not so different from the attitudes here in the United States in terms of how parents related to their children. If you came from a poor family or a low income family, well, both of your parents probably worked. They didn't have a whole lot of time to be looking after their children. And that's, again, that's not to say they didn't love their children. They probably did. But the idea that a mom was going to stay home and take care of children the way it was, fairly common in the 40s and certainly into the 1950s and 60s. Even then, among poor and low income people, that they just didn't have the financial wherewithal for that to happen. And so this idea that Carnegie had about the power of positive relationships was somewhat of an innovation, if you will, for its time. So, and this was all aimed at making success accessible to ordinary Americans. So while America didn't have a strict class system like England did, the idea of there being social and economic mobility in America, as I was saying before, it wasn't a widely held belief. So if you were born to a somewhat poor farming family, as a child, then it was pretty well thought that, well, that's what you were going to be a farmer yourself, and the idea that you were going to leave the farm and go to the city and become successful, well, that's a creature, or that's an idea of the 20th century, not really of the 19th century. Now, that's not to say that there weren't children who didn't hate farm life and ran away. They certainly did. They may have wanted to be successful, but the avenues and the tools in general were not there in the 19th century. So, in his book, Stephen Watts talks about Carnegie's life in the context of the economic shifts and the cultural shifts that were going on in 20th century America. For example, urbanization. So as industrialization became ever greater, more and more young people did leave farms because there was opportunities to work in manufacturing. Could have been meat packing, automobile manufacturing, electrical equipment manufacturing, all kinds of things that were going on in the first half of the 20th century that enticed young people away from a rural agriculture-based life. As well, agriculture was mechanizing, and so more work could be done by one person with things like tractors, etc., than could have been done before. So these broader cultural shifts and economic shifts are the background in which Dale Carnegie brought his message to Americans. And in particular, you notice 1936. So that's not long after the Great Depression. Okay, the Great Depression started essentially in 1930, and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt came into office in 1933 with his New Deal. It was not particularly successful in the early years. So 1936 America was still a pretty heavily depressed economy. And so I think Americans were also receptive to a message of how they could achieve success, especially in the face of what seemed to be such dire economic circumstances. So, and another one of the reasons I like Stephen Watts's book is he does point out, look, there were criticisms of Dale Carnegie, as well as plaudits. So, a lot of people praised him for democratizing the pursuit of success, but others felt that what he was promoting was very superficial, even manipulative, be positive and that kind of stuff. And if you've been around any of the self-help, movement, or the personal improvement movements, as it was called back then, some of the people who pursue it do seem to be um, almost like charlatans. So I think, there are people who have stood the test of time, like Dale Carnegie, like Zig Ziglar, another huge personality in this area. And I think that one has to separate those who were sincerely committed to helping their fellow Americans succeed, to those who saw the whole self-help business as an opportunity to make a lot of money, to a certain extent preying on the hopes and desires of people who for whatever reason had little hope of really hitting the kind of success that they were being told they could achieve. So again, I think it's an honest look at Stephen Watts takes an honest look at Dale Carnegie's life, and that's an important background for someone who's going to consider adopting Dale Carnegie's philosophy, to have that background. So I'm gonna talk next. Let me just put this to the side here so I don't bump it off. I'm gonna talk next about Dale Carnegie's philosophy. So, and I think you will see in it, I think I put this in some of my social media posts as well. We talk now about something called EI, emotional intelligence. So that's just the latest, term, the term du jour, as the French might say, of what is, people skills and or soft skills. They've had different names over the years and decades, but a lot of this, again, and the reason I'm talking about Dale Carnegie is because he originated a lot of this. So first of all, his part of his philosophy, or one of the key points, is to develop people skills. So, and this is really the ability to understand and connect with others. So there's 4 points on that I want to mention that I think are worth knowing about. First of all, showing a general interest in others. Second, smiling and being approachable. Third, remembering and using people's names. And fourth, being a good listener and encouraging others to talk about themselves. So these really, if we can master these 4 skills, people are far more likely to like us and trust us. Now, the key thing here is your interest has to be genuine, right? So a person can be smiling and approachable. He can remember their names. He can be a good listener and encourage them to talk about themselves, and be a complete scammer. I'm trying to think of the word, but someone who is looking to sort of get close to someone in order to take advantage of them, right? That's why, and that's where I think this idea of Dale Carnegie's techniques being manipulative in part comes from. But notice the interest needs to be genuine. We need to genuinely care about other people, right? And without naming names, talking to a friend of mine who's working on this skill, and I think one of the hardest parts to master. I know him to be a very caring person, but to be one and to be able to express that in the way people actually sense it and take it on board, those are 2 different things, right? And you know the old adage, if someone has to tell you that they're telling you the truth, they're probably not telling you the truth. So if someone tells you, I care about you, that typically redounds as, well, if you care about me, you don't have to tell me you do. Show me you do, right? Show me, show me, show me, as Eliza Doolittle said in My Fair Lady, right? So how do we then show genuine interest in other people? And that is, we have to develop a sense of empathy. Okay. There's just there's no other way to do it. And you would say, well, I mean, you're either empathetic or you're not. That's not true. That's not true at all. And I will use myself as an example. So if you knew me when I was a boy, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, I was painfully shy in addition to being very introverted. Those are not the same things, by the way, as I've talked about in other shows. So it was virtually impossible for me to express empathy because I was I could not relate to other people because of my shyness. So I remember as a boy, I was invited to a birthday party, and we went and got a present for I don't even know if it was a girl or a boy's party, but anyway, my mother took me to the party. I was a little boy, so she walked me to the door, and I walked in, and I was so uncomfortable, so freaked out that within a few minutes I begged my mother to take me home. Right? Um, Nobody who would have interacted with me would have thought me to be an empathetic person, because I wasn't. I was too frightened, too upset to express any kind of empathy. But over the years, and I will say that for me, um, I had an example, um, and that was my paternal grandfather, who was an almost universally loved man. And so as a boy, I got to interact with him and get a sense of the feeling of calm and engagement that I got being around my in Yiddish. The word for grandfather is Zeta or Zaidi, so I called him my Zaidi. And I was fortunate to have that opportunity, because that sort of clued me in that if I could overcome my shyness, there was a lot more available to me in the world, right? And so that's what I say. Uh, Empathy, or the feeling and projection of empathy, is a developed skill, not a born, for want of a better word, talent. Okay. Now, it's very difficult, I think, to feel empathy if we don't feel a certain sense of self-awareness, of self-respect. And so, to the extent that we don't have those qualities, we probably are not going to project at least genuine empathy. And again, I can say from my own life, there was someone that used to be in my life that I thought was a very kind, empathetic person, but I realized in retrospect that it wasn't genuine, because the person was not a self-possessed person, and so therefore couldn't be empathetic with someone else because the person was too involved in that person's pain. And so, if we want to be empathetic, the first thing we need to do is kind of get our own stuff figured out, so that at least figure it out enough that we're not so self-absorbed that we can't open up to other people and be understanding of their situations, and have some some sympathy, some empathy, that, for the difficulties they're going through, despite whatever it is that we may be going through, right? That's, in the end, that is the hallmark of empathy. Everybody's going through stuff, right? That's the nature of life. That's not the question. The question is, can we express caring? Can we express um, respect? Can we be helpful to someone who's in need, um, even if their need doesn't seem to be as great as ours? Okay, that's true empathy, right? And that's what I would suggest we all should strive for. And that is indeed what Dale Carnegie was promoting in terms of his people skills. So again, show genuine interest in others, smile and be approachable, remember people's and use people's names, and be a good listener, and encourage others to talk. So when I'm out exercising, which I'm guessing I'm not going to do today because the air quality is so horrible, everybody I walk by, I say hello, or I give them a little salute or something like that. I give them a smile. So there's he appears to be a homeless man who hangs out in the park in Beverly Hills that runs along Santa Monica Boulevard, and I walk that path sometimes 2-3 times a week, and so I see him on a regular basis. And I, kind of give him a salute and a smile every time I see him. I've been doing this now for months, and only recently, and when I say recently, maybe in the last 2, maybe 3 weeks, has he started to even acknowledge that I'm doing that. So now, look, I think for most people, he's invisible, because he's, just a homeless guy. But I think that, look, he's a human being. I don't know what his circumstances are. I don't know how he ended up, where he's ended up in life. Um, who knows? I'm not going to even speculate. But I think that we have a duty to our fellow human beings, to acknowledge their existence, and to give them a smile. If nothing, what does it cost us? Is absolutely zero. And I will say that the first time he smiled back at me, I really I treasure that because he's saying you had a positive impact on me. What better interaction can there be between two human beings who are essentially strangers, right? So people skills, absolutely number one, top of the list. Number two, influence through positivity. So, you know, if you've been around for very long, people tend to influence others in either a positive or a negative way. I've talked about this before. There's two ways of bolstering our own self-image. One is to seek achievements, to do good things, especially for other people, and to take justified pride in doing those good things, those good positive things. The other is to put other people down so that in comparison we feel like we're better than they are. And that's a horrible thing to do. Absolutely horrible thing to do. And in the end, it does not create genuine self-esteem, because I think somewhere inside of a person who does that, that person knows he's behaving horribly, and so he's not really the good person he thinks he is. And again, I know people who are like this, that they've made their lives about convincing themselves that other people are lesser than they are. And that's a shame, because first of all, we don't have the ability to really know what's going on with another person, even our spouses. If you have one, as much as we may know about them, we're not we're not living their life. We're living a life with them. And so I say, when I deal with the subject, look, I leave the accounting, what's called the cheshbon in Hebrew, the accounting of a human being's life. I leave that to God. I have no idea. What are the true challenges that a person has? How well are they dealing with them? I can't possibly know that. All I can know is, as best as possible, is in that regard, is myself. Okay, so I don't know the challenges that another human being has faced, and so they may have very well faced much bigger challenges than I ever did, and they may have come much farther than I ever could, but not knowing that, I can't see it. So for me to suggest that I'm that some person is deserving of my scorn is completely untrue. So I think, again, that's the kind of positivity that Dale Carnegie espoused. Not the sort of, you always got to see the sunny side of the street. What I call toxic positivity. Everything gets turned, no matter how it is, you turn it into it's being great. No, with due respect, I don't believe. Sometimes bad things happen in life, and they are bad, and they are sad. I mean, there are tragedies in life. I Just before I started the show, I got an email from someone I had just been introduced to yesterday, a potential business contact, and I had sent him an email saying, "Hey, it's great to meet you. If you have some time, I'd love to talk with you this afternoon." And the email I got back was, "I got evacuated from my house because of the fires, as did 90% of my staff." Okay, I'm sorry. There's no way to look at that positively. Oh, well, this is an opportunity to look at a different way of living. I mean, come on. The fire is a disaster. Let's be honest with each other. The fire is a disaster. Getting evacuated from your house is very, very difficult. And to suggest that there's, some sort of positive side of that, especially while it's going on, that would be that's what I call toxic positivity. Better to acknowledge the difficulty that the person is going through and offer support and help. Okay. And then once they've had an opportunity to deal with the chaos, to recover from whatever it was, then help them, move their life in a more positive, in a positive direction, not a more positive, in a positive direction. But again, going back to that key concept, genuine. So the positivity has to be for the genuine benefit of the individual. And that's, again, I think that is what identifies Dale Carnegie's idea of positivity. So, he would say, look, avoid criticizing, condemning, complaining about other people, complaining about your life, right? Look, we can all sort of whine on and on about our lives. And by the way, sometimes we need to get that off our chest. And if we're talking to a close friend, one of our top five, so then it's appropriate, because we don't want to bottle all that up inside, because eventually it is going to come out. But in general, when we're interacting with people, put the criticism aside. Okay. Now, again, if it's someone that's close to us and they're doing something that's hurting themselves, hopefully that relationship is close enough where you can say to the person, "Hey, look, I mean this for your benefit. I'm not sure you realize how you're coming off to other people." Okay. So if you're going to serve up criticism, then we need to serve it up in a way that will be most likely to be heard by the person and help them to handle things better in the future. Right. So we want to, we want to productively criticize, if you will. Okay. Condemnation rarely, if ever. Okay, yeah, you can condemn Hitler all you want. Frankly, you can condemn Vladimir Putin all you want. Now, I have friends who tell me that Putin's a good guy. Sorry, don't buy it. Okay, the only reason he's not Hitler is he doesn't have the power and charisma that Hitler had. That's all. So, the only reason he's not Stalin, same thing. Doesn't have the power and charisma, and perhaps the absolutely dogged ruthlessness that Hitler had. But we're talking about a former head of the KGB, right? So you want to condemn Vladimir Putin, go at it, right? I'm not saying, there's no one worthy of being condemned, murderers, terrorists, absolutely condemn them. But in our day-to-day lives, the overwhelming majority of people that we come in contact with, there's just no basis for condemning them at all, right? And it's become a big thing here in the United States, especially in the political realm, to condemn the people who you disagree with politically. I find that to be a completely useless thing to do. I may disagree with their political beliefs. Fine, I disagree with their political beliefs. Okay, but in general, that does not make them evil. Okay, I'm talking about in sort of mainstream American beliefs, from right to left or left to right, whatever you want to say. Okay, people have different beliefs. They had different upbringings, et cetera, et cetera. So there's condemning them because they disagree with me, I think, is frankly a foolish approach, and it's a violation of having good people skills as well. Okay, and in terms of leadership, so rather than um, forcing people to do our will, we want to help them understand why joining with us in this effort is to our mutual benefit. Okay, again, that's influencing through positivity. Now, of course, leadership like that is not always appropriate. You're in the middle of a battle in a war. Okay, you're going to give the orders, and that's it. That's how it works. But here in civilian life, the idea that we're going to give orders and people are going to follow us and be sincere adherents to our plan, not nearly as likely to happen today as it was a century ago. And so we want to use positivity in how we work with people to lead them, if you will, to adopt our mission. And finally, we want to give honest and sincere appreciation. Right? I knew someone who used to say thank you all the time, and what I came to realize was just a habit. I don't think there was much thought behind it. Now, I don't want to say that the person was insincere per se, but it was just the way the person spoke. So I think that we're better off maybe not expressing appreciation quite so often, so that when we do, the recipient knows that we're being sincere, that we honestly appreciate their effort, right? So one sincere thank you is better than 10 thank yous that are just sort of set off the top of our head, because that's the habit we've developed. Okay, so next, overcome fear through building confidence. So again, this was another part of Carnegie's personal development, really facing our fears to overcome them. Okay, and learning to act with confidence even when we feel uncertain. Right, this so-called fake it till you make it. Right, I remember counseling a married couple that was going through some difficulties, and they sincerely wanted their marriage to endure, but they were struggling. And I said, well, how about treating each other nicely, even when you don't feel in particularly nicely toward your spouse. And the wife turned to me, she said, so even if am mad at my husband, I should treat him nicely. I said, well, I mean, look, obviously you want to deal with whatever it is that has he's done that angered you, but that doesn't mean that you you have to jump on him. Act with confidence that you love this man, and you're going to work these things through, even though you don't know for sure if you're going to work them through. Right? That attitude will be much more productive, and it will build his confidence too. If you approach him with the attitude that you think this can be worked out, then he's more likely to open up to you and work with you to work the issue through, and vice versa, right? So, um, and another important skill in this is the ability to, shoot, I wish I could remember the fellow's name now. I took sales training from him, the famous real estate guy. He said, I never see failure as failure, but only the opportunity to learn and grow. I'm paraphrasing it a little bit, right? So, and indeed, that is what failure is. Okay, failure is a growth opportunity. Now, we may not be able to see that right at the moment when it becomes evident that we failed. Okay, I get it. I get it. Maybe it would be nice if we could make these transitions instantaneously, but that's not necessary. That's probably not going to be the case. However, we need to teach ourselves to habituate ourselves to the process of reframing the failures we have in our life as opportunities to learn lessons and to do better next time. Right? That's something I've tried very hard to instill in my daughter, for example. Right? And I think it's important. Now, it's not easy, right? And some failures seem very devastating. Okay. And by the way, some failures, they just are failures. Okay. That's not to say that there aren't lessons that can be learned from them. They can be, but in the end, they're still failures. Okay. And if that's the case, we just have to come to terms with, okay, I failed in this respect. I'm going to take the lessons that I can and move on with my life. That may be the best that I can do. Okay. And this sort of dovetails on the ability to resolve conflicts. So, the Carnegie really developed methods that, first of all, helped people avoid arguments. So, one of the habits I've worked very hard to develop over the years is, if I say something to someone and they come back at me in disagreement, so I've trained myself to think, oh, I think maybe I didn't explain myself well. So I take responsibility for them, responding to me in a way that demonstrates that perhaps they don't understand what it is I said. So rather than saying you're not getting it or you don't understand, I'll say I think I haven't explained myself well. Let me try again. Okay, that gives them the opportunity to keep their minds open because I haven't condemned them. I've taken the responsibility, and it gives me the opportunity to take a second or sometimes even a third shot at explaining myself in a way that maybe they will hear it. Now, sometimes people are just not open to hearing our point of view. Okay, now that's human beings, right? But rather than putting the burden of understanding you on the other person, take it for yourself. And that's a good way to avoid arguments. Okay. And I talked about this next one earlier. respecting the opinions of people, even if you disagree. Now, I would tweak that a little bit, because although Carnegie says you should respect the opinions, I'm not sure we need to respect an opinion that we disagree with. It depends on what that opinion is. Okay, so someone may have an opinion about a situation that I think is damaging either to them or other people. So I don't have to respect that opinion. Okay, I probably need to listen to it, but I don't need to respect it. So I would differ with Carnegie there. And finally, openly and quickly admitting mistakes when we make them, right? Rather than doubling down, right? No, 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 I was right, and blah, 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 blah. That's a good way to get into an argument to create a big conflict. No, if you made a mistake, yeah, we made a mistake. Oh, shoot, I made a mistake. You're right. I didn't see it, or I wasn't aware of the full picture, or sometimes I had an incident in a meeting yesterday, and they said, "Well, didn't you say such and such last meeting?" And I said, "Did I?" I said, "Oh, okay. I mean, I'll take you at your word. I guess I did." I said, "I don't know why I said that." I said, "Because it doesn't make sense to me now." So, and then they went on to explain it, and then I said, "Oh, okay. Now I know what you're talking about." I said, "Okay, yeah, okay, yes, yes. This is what it was about." And thank you for the better explanation, right? But look, sometimes we're wrong. We just are. Let's just own it and move on, right? I don't know about you. I don't want people to think that I'm perfect, because I can't possibly keep up that illusion. It's not going to work. Okay. Finally, we want to seek, the goal is not perfection, it's continuous improvement. And this, I think, aside from having people skills, and this is these are kind of the bookends: people skills to begin with, continuous improvement to end with, right? It's not about being perfect, because we're never going to reach that state. It's always about being a little bit better today than we were tomorrow. And even knowing that sometimes we're going to be worse today than we were tomorrow. Okay. All right. That happens, right? Go to bed, wake up the next day, and recommit ourselves to improving the next day, right? So how do we, engage in continuous improvement? Well, first of all, lifetime learning. If you're watching this show, you are engaging in continuous improvement, right? Professionally, always looking for new learning opportunities for new experiences, maybe taking on a new mentor, something like that. Okay. So regularly seek feedback. Now, you don't have to seek feedback from everybody, and I would not at all advise that. Okay, if a person doesn't know you well, you want to be careful about seeking feedback from that person, right? Now, maybe you gave a talk and they heard the talk and you asked for feedback about the talk, fine. But especially if you're looking for personal feedback, get it from people who know you well and who've known you a long time and who have a sense of understanding about you, and ignore the feedback, especially the unasked for feedback that you get from other people, because they don't really know you. So what they're saying may not be valid at all. So, being, and then next, be open to new ideas. Now, I'm probably going to get the expression a little bit wrong, but we don't want to have minds that are so open they roll out of our ears, right? Where we accept every idea, no matter how crazy, ridiculous, or harmful it is. Not at all. But be open to hearing something, okay? And look, there may be some things we hear that we're going to reject out of hand, but other things, hey, that's a good idea. So again, I was in a meeting this morning, and we were discussing an issue that I had raised, and the people I was talking to said, "Well, I thought when I was thinking about the idea, I thought it was important for this reason. I'm like, oh yeah, that's that's a great idea. That's actually a better idea for thinking about this issue than the reason I was thinking about it. Right? I was suggesting change largely for the sake of change, but this person, the person one of the people I was meeting with, had an actual reason why she thought we should be considering this change. So I'm like, oh, there you go. Right? So it's good to be open to these things. Sometimes it'll be small things, sometimes larger things, but have a sense of openness about them. And finally, we want to practice. We want to practice the skills that we're. So when I was first working to habituate the response of, oh, I think maybe I didn't explain it correctly, so if you don't mind, I'll try it again. I had to be very intentional about doing that. Okay. Now it largely happens out of habit because I've been working on it for years and years and years and years and years. But especially when we're trying to adopt a change, we need to be very intentional about practicing that change. And again, this is all part of Dale Carnegie's philosophy. So what you've been hearing from me here, I've been giving you examples from my own life, but they're examples of how I applied Dale Carnegie's principles. And hopefully from my example, you will get a sense of how you can apply these ideas in your own life. So that's in the end, that's really the goal that I'm seeking, on your behalf, or for you, I guess, as a teacher in this sense. So real quickly, just reviewing the points of Dale Carnegie's philosophy that I covered. First of all, develop people skills. Seek to influence through positivity. Overcome fear and build your confidence. Learn how to avoid avoid conflict and how to resolve conflict when it arises. And finally, commit to continuous improvement. Those are the philosophies of the self-help messiah, as Stephen Watts calls Dale Carnegie. And again, I recommend to you both Stephen Watts's book and the philosophy of Dale Carnegie. So thank you so much for joining me today on People Making Money. I appreciate it very much, especially my live viewers. Always great to see. This is my last show for this week. So I wish you a wonderful rest of the day and week. Next week on Monday at 10 a.m. is my show, Trust and Estates Weekly. My guest is, let me make sure I get it correct here. Yes, Michael Siegel. Okay, and so I hope you'll join Michael and me to hear what he has to say. On Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. And my subject is Tame Your Bureaucracy. And you'll have to tune in to find out what that's about. And then a week from today will be the next edition of People Making Money. And then next week on Thursdays is my every other week show, Jiggers' Place, where we sit down toward the end of the afternoon. It's at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So it's getting toward the end of the day and heading to the end of the week. We have a cocktail and we talk about all those things that are so important in life besides our businesses and professions and wealth building and all that kind of stuff. So I wish you a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the week. And if you're here in the Los Angeles area with me, I hope you and yours are safe from the fires, and that the tragedy that you're dealing with is soon resolved. So signing off as I always do, Marie, darling, you are my bell.